Thank you very, very much. It's a real delight to be here for this occasion, and I want to congratulate all of the honorees, James and Susan, obviously so well deserved tonight. But I have the great pleasure of presenting this award to someone who's been a great friend to the United States and to me personally. And you just got a glimpse of some of the reasons why he truly is one of the great diplomats of recent times. He is someone who understands the brief that he has been given, who uses his considerable intelligence, his shrewdness, his graciousness, his humor to move not only people in his own government, which is sometimes the hardest group to move, but people in the countries where he is serving and in putting together coalitions. When I left the Secretary of State position, Peter and his wonderful wife, Susie, who's also here, hosted me at a dinner at the British ambassador's residence. And he had heard that I was a great fan of the television show Downton Abbey. He's quite an intelligence operator as well as a diplomat. And so he had the cast get together to do a video for the occasion. And it was the kind of personalized touch and thoughtfulness that he brings to friendships and diplomacy. During his time as the British ambassador to the United States, the close relationship between our two countries was really a pleasure. I am so grateful for the support that he gave on a number of difficult issues during that time. He mentioned one, namely the effort to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons. And he brought to that the very important experience of having served in Iran for a number of years prior to the 1979 revolution. He was someone who did bring people together. It was somewhat more possible back then, but it still was not an easy task to get the Russians, the Chinese, the Germans, the French, the Brits, and the Americans all on the same page. But Peter did that, and he was often the essential glue that brought people together and kept them together in the face of setbacks and leaks and troubles back in capitals about what was really going on in Washington. The United States and the United Kingdom have long been allies, but I think it's important to recognize that that can't be taken for granted. You're helping to keep that going and strengthening it through the business ties across the Atlantic. Our governments also have to keep working on it, as well as people-to-people relationships. But Peter understood what a great diplomat knows, and he knows it intuitively, probably gets better about it as he goes, that he has to really understand not just his own government and his own people to represent them to the best of his or her ability, but he has to keep putting himself into the other shoes of those with whom he is negotiating, dealing, or even just socializing. So it's no surprise that Peter is being honored tonight for his contributions to the transatlantic relationship. And it's a great pleasure for me to publicly thank him for his service to his own country, but his extraordinary partnership when he served as the ambassador. And I am hoping that his wisdom, and you can find it in the memoir that he wrote, his wisdom will be learned from and hopefully followed by other diplomats coming up, not only through the Foreign Office in London, but in the United States, at the State Department, and in other countries that truly appreciate what it takes to maintain our values, protect our interests, and try to make the world a more peaceful, prosperous, secure place. So it is now my great honor to represent this body by giving this award to my friend, someone who has earned it through a lifetime of diplomacy and service. So the Transatlantic Leadership Award goes to a transatlantic legend, a true statesman, Sir Peter Westmacott.
Hilary, that was just so sweet of you. So kind of you to be here this evening, and you've honored all of us with your presence. I know how much you've got going on, how many places you need to be at, but making the time to come here and being so generous with your remarks, I'm really very, very touched by it. And to think that, over the last 50 years, I've been busy trying to tell people that diplomats and politicians tell the truth, and there we were, hearing what you've just been saying. It meant the world to me to be appointed as ambassador to Washington, as you know, and I enjoyed every minute of it. And I'm thrilled to be honored in this way this evening, along with the other two very distinguished guests. And I know that it's very, very important to British American business that you are here this evening. Look how many people there are here. We're all thrilled that you're with us. And this is such an important organization in terms of promoting the relationship between our two countries across the Atlantic. Never been a more important time for that. So thank you so much for it. I really did enjoy being ambassador here. As you can imagine, as you remember, the relationship is very special. And I loved every moment when I was here for the 200th anniversary of the War of 1812 and being reminded even by your husband of the flames and the dark patches in the White House where the redcoats burnt the place down, and the Capitol Hill as well. But there were some great moments, and there were some great historic moments, and I remember going off to Fulton, Missouri for the 50th anniversary of the death of that great Anglo-American Winston Churchill. And that was a special moment to be able to remember all that, to remember the Iron Curtain speech that he pronounced in Fulton, Missouri. And if the light was good enough, I just would like to remind you of something that Winston Churchill said while he was there, which was that this was just a few months after the end of the Second World War, when the Brits, the Americans, and the Russians, and a number of other allies, but the Russians included, had finally defeated Hitler and fascism. And there he was in Fulton, Missouri, Winston Churchill, who had not been treated tremendously kindly sometimes by Stalin, saying he had become convinced from personal experience that there is nothing our Russian friends admire so much as strength, and nothing for which they have less respect than weakness, especially military weakness. I put that alongside the great Lenin remark, the Lenin dictum, probe with bayonets. If you find mush, push on. Only if you find steel, withdraw. Now, bear in mind what Churchill was saying about our Russian friends and what Lenin was saying about Russian tactics, and apply that to the geopolitical reality of the appalling invasion of Ukraine now. And I think there's lots to be thought about, not least in the concept of that great Anglo-American Winston Churchill, who was so perceptive, I think, in what he was telling us to be careful about. Now, one other thing that he said, amongst all the other aphorisms from Winston Churchill, his last remarks to the members of the cabinet when he resigned as Prime Minister in 1955 were, "Never be separated from the Americans." Now, when Hillary was the Secretary of State and I had the honor to be in Washington, as you can imagine, that was not a problem. We did, as she was saying, a whole lot of different things together, and I'm very proud of the different areas in which the United Kingdom and the United States at that time were able to work together. She mentioned that shortly after she left the State Department, we had that party in the House, and when we did the Downton Abbey moment, which all of us, I think, will all remember. But we also, shortly after that, did an event for the Clinton Global Initiative, a wonderful creation by President Clinton and Secretary Hillary. And when we did that, we borrowed the services of someone called a mentalist. A mentalist is one of those people who can divine secrets, who can bend spoons, and who can twist glasses. And there was a moment when I asked him to move a gold ring from one of my hands to the other. And I can still remember President Clinton squealing with joy and saying, "Hillary, you just got to come and see this guy." This magician is extraordinary. And I tell that story partly because it was part of the fun, but also because I do believe that our diplomacy now needs a bit more magic. We had some magic then for fun, but let us look around at what's going on. I was at a talk last week which David Cameron, now the British Foreign Secretary, was giving. And he warned that the world was now, and I quote, "more dangerous, volatile, and confrontational than most people alive had ever known." I think that's, it's a bit dramatic, but I think it is rather like that. And I'm not going to run through the panoply of all the international crises of which we all need to worry about, which you'll be thrilled to hear. But I would just say that I think, this is sort of a personal comment, that I think the polarization of views and the manipulative populists who are playing on people's fears and anger, social media and hostile foreign governments spreading disinformation, algorithmically fueling prejudice and bigotry, are all making it that much harder for us to find the common ground that we need to try to make the world a safer and more prosperous state in the way in which the Secretary was mentioning. And they are actually threatening the very foundations of our democracy in the process. And we've got to be aware of that. There was a very good piece last week in The New Yorker by Susan Glasser, who was writing about the politics of the Middle East. And she said, "There is no center ground anymore. There are just two opposite sides divided by a very deep chasm." I fear in the Middle East that's kind of right. She always writes beautifully, Susan, but it's a depressing reality that that is where we are. And I think the point I would just like to end on is that I think at this time, Britain might have left the European Union, which is a substantial majority of British people now recognize was a terrible mistake, but we continue to share with America diplomatic, military, intelligence assets, a common language, in many ways a shared culture, and a commitment to the rule of law and to basic freedoms going back 800 years to the Magna Carta. And I just feel that if the Brits and the Americans, with all that going for us, cannot make a decent start now of rediscovering that common ground, then who can? And we better get on with it. Thank you so much.